What's going on, everybody? This is Gene here with Entropy & Sons, and I'm here with another video tutorial for our synth, the Recursion Studio. This video is going to be discussing the basics of I/O configuration and input control, and that's going to cover audio, CV, video, and MIDI, which are the four general types of control signals the synth supports. So first thing, configuration of the synth for this video. We have video in, power in, audio in. I have a MIDI controller plugged in over USB and a video camera plugged in as well. So, and also my synth is updated to the newest software version. So the first thing to know is that there are two general ways of controlling the synth with input signals. One is by directly mapping one of these signals to a numerical parameter, and the other is by loading a module which visualizes some of the information. So we're going to talk about the first one first. To recap, parameters are the numerical controls that kind of go into the simulation. Right now we're using a knob to control this parameter and this parameter too. And the idea is we can use MIDI or CV or some of these audio signals to also control these parameters. So first of all, we go into the I/O configurator. I'm not going to dive too deeply into this right now. We'll cover all the details in another video, but you do have four general tabs that kind of shows you what you have plugged in and lets you configure the various signals. So right now we're on the MIDI configurator, and you can see when I actually do something on my MIDI controller that it's going to show what messages it's receiving. So the idea is you go right here and you can map a MIDI message to a parameter action or something like that. So you type on new, and this right here is the mapping editor. Again, I'm not going to go into this in super great detail because it is fairly complicated, but I'm just going to try to show a little bit of what it can do here. So what we are going to do is, so first of all, a mapping connects a signal to an action, where signals can come from the buttons, it can come from CV, it can come from audio, it can come from your MIDI controllers, and an action lets you do something on the synth. And for instance, you can control a parameter, turn off an LFO, or like load a patch or something like that. And in general, you can map an arbitrary number of signals to an arbitrary number of actions, so you can have like one button press do like a dozen things if you'd like. But we're just going to do something basic right now. It also has a learn feature, which is what I'm going to use. So first of all, there's a little selector for the type of action you want to use in your mapping, but I'm just going to twiddle a knob on my MIDI controller, and it's found that I sent in a MIDI CC message with CC value 70, and we're going to use that to set a parameter, which we just do right there, and then we'll just do that. And now I have created an action, so when I give the synth MIDI CC 70, it's going to set the value of the width parameter. See, that's what's happening right now. Another real quick example. We're going to make a MIDI note on message. Note on that one. Turn on an LFO. Sine wave. Let's just do that. And now we've created a toggle for an LFO that controls the fade parameter. This LFO is actually reading the tempo of the incoming audio and using that to set its rate, so it synchronizes some of the I/O signals. So that's the basics of doing this. Again, we're going to get into the details of all this kind of stuff in another video, but that's generally how you go in and map like a MIDI controller up to something. You can do the same thing with CV. CV signals can be mapped to any arbitrary parameter. The audio input can actually give you a whole bunch of signals. It can, you can, for instance, map the low frequency energy that's coming in over audio to some numerical parameter or pretty much anything like that you can think of. So the other way of integrating input signals is by loading a module. So it's a little more advanced, and we're going to dive into the create mode real quick to do this. But I have a camera plugged in, and it's not being visualized. So I'm just going to go right here and actually load a module which just directly displays the data coming from the camera. And now my camera input is being textured onto the simulation. There are modules that visualize the camera data. There's modules that visualize audio data. We can go in here and load one of those real quick. There's some CV visualizer. Yeah, see now it's actually using some waveforms to create some audio content. And there's visualizers for the CV data as well. So there is an alternative to going in here and loading these modules manually. There's a setting. So first of all, you see I have audio plugged in and video plugged in, but this patch isn't responding to those. So if you go into the info panel for this patch, you see that it's not actually tagged with video or audio. So it's by default not responsive to those control signals. And actually, the majority of the patches are responsive to audio, but they're not responsive to video. And instead of having to go in and manually wire up a video module into one of these patches, there's a setting here called Autom Mapping. It's on by default, so you probably shouldn't need to play with it. But the idea is that if it's on in the Play UI, and it's on, for instance, for video, and you have a video camera plugged in, if you go to the Play UI and load a patch, then it's going to integrate your video source. And this works for all of the other patches here too. So we just click on one, and because auto mapping is on, this patch has now been made automatically video responsive. Like I said, they're all pretty much by default audio responsive, so I turned that setting off temporarily, but it's something to know. If you're playing with the screensaver or just screwing around in the play page, you almost certainly want that on, because the only other alternative is to go into the create view and actually go in there and manually load a module of the appropriate type. Anyways, that's the quick overview of the I/O system for the synth. Like I said, in another couple of videos, we'll go into that in further detail, both all of the control signals and also the intricacies of the mapping system. So stay tuned for the next video, and I think we're going to go into the Perform UI for that one.